I think, is Joan in here? Okay. Yeah, I think we're getting close. Everyone got quiet all of a sudden.
Yeah, I know. I heard
Up to you.
For sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I know parking here is a bit of a challenge. My name is Jonah Polgar. I'm the assistant store manager and event coordinator here at Peak Design. See a lot of new familiar faces and new faces as well. Pretty much here at Peak Design, we create and design tools that make everyday life more efficient. We are also an advocate for making a big positive impact to the environment. Now, pretty much today we've heard about AI photography, right? I've heard that there's an AI, got an AI student here. We're hearing things about ChatGPT, right? AI image generators. And I think you're all here to learn all that from today, Mr. Adam Chinn. All right, Adam?
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to thank Peak Design for having me here. I was in shopping one day. I have that backpack. It's really good. So I highly recommend. I'll get started. I'm going to do this talk in two halves. The first half is I'm going to talk about my stuff. I've been making pictures with AI for about 6 years now, because that's really how long it's been able to do it. And in the second half, I'm going to talk about all the stuff that's been happening in the last year and in the last week about AI. And this is what we're seeing in the news every day about these image generators and this ChatGPT and text, and now they're making music with it as well. And I think everyone, what I was feeling was that looking at social media, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of curiosity. There's some people who are pissed off, kind of feeling ripped off and things like that. So I thought, hey, this is a good time to talk about these things. I don't work for one of these big companies. I'm actually a little ambivalent about this stuff. I mean, on one hand, it's amazing. On the other hand, it's kind of terrifying. So after I do that half of the talk, I'm really going to open it up to everyone here, because I think I'm not the expert in that. Everyone has feelings, and we're reading about this every day in the news. So I think I just want to provide a forum for everyone to talk about. Okay, so before I start, how many people have used one of the image generators? Okay, good. How many people have done stayed up all night using one of the image generators? Yeah. How many people have used the ChatGPT? Okay. Okay, that's good. How many people have never seen a picture made by an image generator and have no idea what it is? Okay, about 2 people. Okay, so let me start about what I do. About 6 years ago, I started mixing photography and AI. And what that meant was I'm looking at the pixels of a photograph, and in those pixels is information. And what we have here is a database of photographs. It's a whole stack of photographs. And I'm seeing what you can do to augment a photograph with this database and to see where we can take photography. And I'm looking at this from a computer graphics point of view, which was actually my original field. And so on a pixel level, there are things that I'm asking. And I'm basically asking them, what does a pixel know? And because a pixel has information. And then when you put all these pixels together in a photograph, you're asking the question of, what does a photograph know? And from the point of view of a pixel, or if you would take one really big step back, you're saying, what is a photograph? As a collection of pixels, what is a photograph? So that is sort of how I approach this whole thing. My background is in computer graphics. I started about 40 years ago. He was there, she was there. This is right before the introduction of the Macintosh computer. So I wanted to make pictures on a computer, and at that time it was very different from now. You had to, there were only about 4 places in the country where you could make a picture on a computer, and because the equipment was expensive, and then you also had to write your own software. So there was basically nothing to help you make a picture. And what we would do at that time really would sit around, we would sit around in the evenings and quite simply try to make the coolest picture that we could think of using this really new and difficult technology. And we were, for money, we were making graphics for television, you know, the opening for Monday Night Football or the NBC Peacock and things like that. And then over the years, the company went into commercials, and then we kind of became part of DreamWorks. And we made movies, you know, like Shrek and Madagascar and Kung Fu Panda and things like that. But really, it's back in the early days that were the most interesting part. And if I look at what I'm doing now with AI, is I'm pretty much practicing the same things. I'm trying to make the coolest picture that I could think of using this really new and difficult technology. So that's my professional background, and then my interest in photography, like everyone else, took pictures on film. I did it through college, did it in the darkroom, and then I had to quit doing it because work got too intense. You know, it was just working too much. And in 2009, or in the mid-2000s, what happened is I had an uncle who was getting older, and he was a photographer. His name was Benjamin Chinn, and a couple of cousins and I, we were taking care of him as he was in assisted living. And it turns out he had been an aerial photographer in World War II in the Pacific, and after the war ended, he came back here and on the GI Bill went to the San Francisco Art Institute and studied under Ansel Adams and Minor White and Imogen Cunningham and Edward Weston and Dorothea Lange. And basically Ansel and Minor White had started this program to train fine art photographers, and they were trying to emphasize minorities and women in that program. So that was, so that was sort of groundbreaking, and then Ben didn't tell us any of this, okay? So, you know, he kind of kept his whole artistic life separate. And what happened towards the end of his life, we started archiving his photos and started trying to get him the information out of him. You know, it was just like, so, you know, you would hang out at, you know, Ansel Adams' house. You know, what happened there? What were you guys talking about? And so actually the point of this story is that, well, actually, Ben is in a show right now at Edge on the Square. Are you Candace? No, you're not Candace. Okay, sorry. I thought you're so. There's a new gallery in Chinatown, and Ben is in a show there that opened 2 weeks ago. Last year he was in a show at the SF MoMA, and his negatives are housed in the Center for Creative Photography in Arizona. So, but the point of the story is that Ben used to walk every year from his home in Chinatown to go to the Pride Parade. And all the way through to the end of his life, he would go take pictures there. And he was practicing what Minor White had taught him. And so as we were working with Ben toward the end of his life, I got curious and I dusted off my cameras and I went down to the Pride Parade, and every year I started taking pictures there because I wanted to see what he was seeing. And so those photos there are basically the set of photos I took over about a decade there, and I still go down and do it. And these are film photos, medium format. Okay, so let's go to the AI. In about 2017, I started learning AI, and this was fear. Okay. Because I said, oh, I may need to get a job in this later because I'd stopped working and, you know, I've kind of aged out. And so maybe if I learn AI, you know, I can get employment later. So I went to Coursera, you know, it was the online school, took a bunch of courses there. They were actually pretty good. So the first thing, and then I decided like, well, I like making pictures, so the only way I'm going to learn this is if I can make a picture with the AI. And 6 or 7 years ago, you know, so I looked it up, you know, it's like it wasn't obvious that you could do it. And what I found was that they were making pictures, they were really hard to do, you had to program, and they were blurry, okay? And I realized, oh, I'm early in this technology. It's not really ready for prime time yet. But because of our background in computer graphics, I said, okay, I can deal with this. So I'm going to show you just one. I did an exercise, a couple of exercises to see what, I don't know anything about AI. What can it do? So this is just one exercise. This is a photograph of a jigsaw puzzle piece. Okay, I bought a jigsaw puzzle, took a picture of it. Here is the second photo. It's the same two pieces put together. And my thought was, well, you're supposed to be smart. You know, this is the okay smarty pants exercise. You know, can I make an AI look at this picture and produce this picture? Can it solve the puzzle? And you know, you're supposed to be smart, right? And I worked on it a little bit. This is about 6 years ago, and I couldn't do it. Okay, so this was the best I got at that time, which is kind of this little blobby shape with kind of the colors of the jigsaw puzzle. But what it couldn't do was it couldn't reason. It had no idea that what I was asking it to do was like try to rotate these things and fit it together. You know, basically it had an idea of the output was supposed to be kind of like this. And that's what it was doing. So the point of this story is to tell you that this is kind of how I started learning what are the contours of this thing. What can it do? What can't it do? And now I'll go to the actual art. Okay. So this is the first series that I did. And it was called Front and Profile. And these were mug shots. Okay, this is an archival mug shot from, you know, who knows when. It looks like the 1940s, 50s, could be the 60s. This picture is input, and I make a prediction of what the other view would look like. Okay, and so that's what neural nets do. So when we're talking about AI right now, we are talking about a subset of the entire field, and this is called machine learning, and it's really one algorithm that we're using over and over again. It's called the neural net. And what I'm doing there is making a prediction on every pixel in the output there. You know, I'm building a network of probabilities for each pixel in the output. So what I was trying to do when I first started, and here's what is interesting about this, is that I just wanted to draw pictures of faces. And I wanted to do a life drawing exercise, which is kind of human. That's human. Hey, let's draw faces. And when you try to draw faces with AI, what you need is a database of faces. Okay, and that's where you start running into problems, and you start seeing all of the issues in AI that we know about every day today. So, you know, what this series what I came to think it's about is really about racial bias. It's about accuracy, it's about privacy. And these are all issues that we know, we talk about every day with AI, but back then, you know, about 5 years ago, these weren't really that common as issues. And we can go the other way. Here we put the face in and we're going to try to predict the profile. What happened with this, to start this, I was looking for a database of faces, went online, and I found one from the federal government. And they had free databases for AI researchers to test their algorithms on. This was from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I downloaded it. There's about 1,000 photos in there. And when I opened it up, the first thing that I noticed was that half the men in there were black. They were African American. And I was kind of freaked out. You know, it's just like, I found a racially biased database. But back then, I'm not even sure if I had a name for it. but I was so uncomfortable with it that I actually said, I don't think I can work with this. So I actually put it away for a year and went looking for more faces. And I couldn't find any for the rest of the year because, there aren't that many databases with faces because you have to get permission for people's, to put their face in the database, and that's hard. So basically I didn't find anything, and about a year later I came back to this and they said, well, I still have ideas. There are still things I want to do. And I said, well, maybe that's the point. Maybe this is about racial bias. That if I use this, then I have a responsibility to talk about it. So that's the only way I was able to give myself permission to go forward with this. And this is, again, like I said, I made these about 4 years ago. And the other issue that we have is accuracy. Like, is this the guy? In the time since I've made this, we know about all the problems with facial recognition software, that it tends to make mistakes. The mistakes tend to be biased towards darker skinned people. And the reason for that is because historically photography was biased. Kodak, up until the 1980s, calibrated all of their film for lighter skinned people. And so African Americans tended to be badly underexposed, and when I look through that database of African American men in this database, some of them are so badly underexposed you don't know who the person is in there. So so this simple exercise of doing a life drawing really showed all the problems that there are with that we talk about every day with AI. I think the last issue is privacy. The government has our driver's license photo. They have our passport photo. Look what they can do with it potentially. They can get your whole head. I don't know I don't see other people doing this right now. But what I saw was that photography can be augmented, and you can make guesses about it. And this is the last one in the series, and I include it only because it's clearly making a mistake. And my system is not accurate. I only have 500 samples in the training, but it's a good example of when mistakes are going to be made. This is, these are some of the mistakes that can happen. Okay. So this is the next series I did, completely different series. This was, this isn't the name of the algorithm. It is word salad. So don't worry about it. What I did was I made a series of portraits, and in this case I took 800 photos of myself. Okay, and I just stood there and just took photos, and I took them all and threw them into this algorithm. So that's my database, 800 photos, and then I had the algorithm train, and over time, as it trained, it would try to draw pictures of me. I would say every 100 training cycles, like, give me 16 examples of me, show me where you're at. And after about 8,000 or 16,000 training cycles, I had about 8,000 little pictures of myself, and they were kind of twisted and warped, and I kind of enjoyed that. And I picked out my favorite 16. And I also did this. This was my next door neighbor. He's a painter. His name is Ferris Plock, P-L-O-C-K, if you guys know him. And the point I want to make with this is that, so for those of you who are using like DALL-E and Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, they're training, working with a database of 6 billion images. And the difference of what I'm doing is I'm building my own databases. Artistically, I find it more fun. On some level, after a while, I found, that because this black box of 6 billion images, I didn't find that as artistically satisfying. So I'll probably continue on this path of my own where I make the database. Either I find a database, like the mugshots, or I make one. This is my friend Dina, 800 photos of her, compressed down and regurgitated. And this is another photographer. His name is Joel Goldsmith. I have a new algorithm I'm trying, because this technology, this is an algorithm from 2019, and there's already a better one out there. So I'll be doing that next. And the other thing I made out of this, there was a byproduct of this process, was that I made a video installation of the actual training of this data set. And so I'm going to show, it's a 12-minute video, but I'm just going to show you 45 seconds. This is what comes out, okay? This is what's being rendered by the computer. And you can see it slowly figuring things out. And it's sort of hypnotic in its own way. Basically, I had no intention, this was not intentional, but I started looking at the output and realized, oh, but I could make a flip book out of it. And it works very well as a video installation. Okay. So, here is the next series that I did. Did it 2 years ago. And I wanted to see what I could do, sort of like the mugshots. And the mugshots work because I have 2 photos of a person in there, okay? You have a front and side. And so when I have multiple views of the same subject, that's a situation that I can exploit and use. And I can do something with it. And so I started thinking, well, in what other situation can I find photographs of the same person, multiple situations of multiple photos? And, I thought, well, photo booths, okay? You get 4 pictures on a strip. And so I started buying photo booth strips. I went off to eBay, and started, fighting over them on eBay. And then I started studying them, and what I found was that when you have a couple in a photo booth, usually about the 3rd photo, they start making out. And it's just, they smile, and they kiss, and then photo number 4 is like, oh my God, we kissed. So after a while, I realized, wow, I think I can predict the kiss. And it was like, because it's basically, the front and the profile, it's now just two profiles, right? So I spent a good portion of the pandemic on eBay trying to find photos of people kissing. And so I would fight over those, and I just cobbled together this database of 100 photos. I mean, it was really not many photos, because you're supposed to have millions and billions in order to do this work. And so I'm just trying to show, hey, what can be done? And so I was asked for photos, booth strips from friends. There was only one booth in San Francisco that made. It was down at the Museum Mécanique, and it was closed because of the pandemic. But anyway, so what I did was I put it in, and this is a prediction of what these 2 women would have looked like had they kissed, which is pretty out there. And the first time I saw one of these pictures come back, this is like, oh my God, they're starting to kiss. I was pretty blown away. And the other thing that you have to know is that we don't know if they actually kissed or not. Okay, this is a guess. This is a prediction. And it was really cool because it was kind of like science fiction in that, I haven't watched too much TV, but you have these alt universes, these science fiction shows, but in this parallel dimension, these people live there, and in this, I felt like I was looking into the parallel dimension to see that, they're actually kissing there. The other thing that's actually pretty cool, about this is that with the mugshots, I thought, oh, I'm just moving the camera. It's just like you can take a front picture or a side picture, and it's the same geometry. And what I didn't realize was actually happening here was that in this picture, the event changed. You know, what's happening in the photo actually changed. And in that respect, you're making fake news at this point. You know, because this is going to look real very soon. You know, within a year or two. If Google decided they wanted to do this, they could actually do it. They just put a little small team on there next year. You know, and I'm sure they have plenty. They have much more resources than me. So we, you know, it's another thing about fake news, but I think it's a little foray into a land of emotion with AI. And I think in some ways, if it gets more real looking, it'll get creepy too. So I think that there's an advantage to being sort of abstract here. And creepy is a big issue as we start moving into these image generators, because a lot of the pictures are really creepy. Okay, so these are two guys kissing. Just a couple more. So this is a photographer. Her name is Lois Bielfeld. This is the last one there. Okay, so I'm going to move on to these image generators that everyone started using. And I'm going to talk about just the first image I'm going to go back just 2 years and a couple months, to DALL-E. So DALL-E was the first one of those image generators of English to picture. DALL-E is made by a company called OpenAI. OpenAI is a little think tank. It's down on Folsom Street, about Folsom and 20th or 21st, and it's like in one of those old garment factories. And some of the big tech oligarchs put money into this years ago, like Elon and stuff, and they're trying to, it's a research facility. They were nonprofit. And in 2018, they became for-profit, and Microsoft bought them. And their big thing that they made in like June of 2020 was GPT-3, which is a very successful language model. But I'm going to start talking about DALL-E first. So they wrote a paper. They put up a website with these cool pictures. You know, the end of like December 2020, maybe, but they didn't give it out the software to anyone, okay? Because their lawyers said, you can't do this. We're gonna get sued. You know, people are gonna make porn. That's the first thing. Within 10 seconds, someone's gonna make porn, or they're gonna make really misogynist images, really racist images. So this thing just kind of dangled out there, you know, and I think if there's one thing I learned, that the human desire to make pictures is really strong. And so I started looking at this thing, and it was pretty amazing, and it made very surreal images. That's why they called it, named it after Salvador Dali, and because it was just sort of mashing together all of the associations with each word in a sentence. At this point, the open source community started saying, hey, well, we want this, we can program this, and there are some very, very good programmers in the open source community. And so during that course of the year, I was trying to keep my eye on it while I was working on the photo booth, and they started making their own versions of it and putting it up on GitHub. Okay, and so I would have, by about a little over a year and a half ago, I got a copy that these guys had pulled together, had coded up themselves on GitHub. I downloaded it, and this one, the guy put faces in it. So the first ones I downloaded didn't have people in it, so I wanted to do people. So this one had faces, and I just, exactly a year ago, I got this copy, and I put in one sentence, a man eating sushi, and I ran it like 1,000 times. And it made, really kind of interesting. There was Sushi never showed up. It was like there was no sushi in their training database. But you know, I got these weird images, and had I known this thing was going to be worth billions of dollars, I would have done more. But I spent most of my time just sort of going, what the heck is this? You know, what does this mean? You know, that if you have, you know, when you have words creating images, isn't that poetry? You know, I mean, what is the relationship? You know, I kind of had an academic sort of reaction to this. I mean, what's going on here is like, again, it's grotesque, it's flesh, but it's a fleshy necktie. You know, and so that was why they started saying, well, this, you know, it was very surreal. So I'm just going to show you a couple of these. I mean, so for those of you who have used the image generators, I went down that rabbit hole early, you know, in that, you know, I spent all night there making weird pictures, and you know, and this is the last one. You know, I think that's a piece of Toro tuna down there. I'm not sure. I actually think that there is sexual content in this picture. I didn't know until I was printing it out, you know, which means that there's sexual content in the database somewhere, you know, and it just, if it's in the database, it'll just come out somewhere. So these things, you know, are pretty weird. Okay, so exactly a year ago, DALL-E 2 comes out, okay? And they train 6 billion images. It gets better. They have a new rendering backend. It's the diffusion model. So DALL-E 2 is better, and they still will not release it to people because the lawyers still say people are going to make porn, okay? And I think Google's making one, you know, all the big companies start making one. No one's releasing it, and at that point, the open source community, people have started banding together, making their own. And earlier in the spring, the first one, Midjourney, comes out. Those of you, you know, which is a very good one. They are available online through a Discord chat room, which you have to go to. You get a couple free ones, then you have to pay money. But it's really good. And then really the big event happens in August 22nd of this last year, where a company called Stability AI makes their version called Stable Diffusion, and they say, here, it's yours, you can download it, you know, go have fun, please don't make porn. Okay? And that was it. So at that point, millions of people downloaded this thing in months, and there was this exponential spike of activity. And this is for those of us who've been working in computer graphics for like 40 years. This really is the biggest thing we've ever seen. It is so powerful, and not just powerful, but it has this incredible utility. This thing's useful. And over the next couple of years, it's going to be, businesses are going to be taking this technology and trying it out. Everywhere where I have an image in my process, can we use this? You know, can we use this AI thing here to make ourselves better, faster, cheaper, you know, somewhere? I think the same thing can be said for this chat GPT, you know, because it's like, ooh, free text generation, you know. Is this good enough to replace existing systems? Can we just slip it in there? Can we get better, faster, cheaper somewhere in there? So that's where I'm saying that the utility of these things are so high, it's going to start showing up and affecting our lives. Okay, so I'm going to show you, this is the first picture I made in September. I got in like 2 weeks after Stability AI came out. And this is the first night. Within the first hour. I had been trying to make pictures with, those of you who have heard of the photographer Nicholas Nixon. Nicholas Nixon did this series of photographs of these 4 sisters, the Brown sisters, and one of them is his wife. And he photographed them every year for 45 years, and they're still alive, and they do it every year. So I had been trying to take all those Nicholas Nixon pictures and make a database out of it, steal his photos. make a database out of that and try to make new pictures of the Brown sisters. And so this came out, and so the first thing I typed in was a black and white photograph of the Brown sisters by Nicholas Nixon. And I got this thing. And actually, here, I'm gonna start passing these things around. So I printed some of these out. So here, you can pass these around to people. This is slide number 2. Here. It's kind of it was jaw-dropping, really. It doesn't know who the Brown sisters are. Okay, I don't, but I think it just ran with the word sisters, but I think it does know who Nicholas Nixon is, and because it's taken like a portrait lighting setup that that I suppose can be lifted from a Nicholas Nixon photo. Okay. Yeah, here's another one that came up tonight, and it's just like there's a creepiness to this thing, and creepy I think is going to be a problem for a while. It's going to be hard to get the creepy out of it. About a week or two later, they fixed the too many sisters problem, and then put a button in, so it's just like it was called high-res fix. And so I pressed the button 2 weeks later when they installed it, and I put in a black and white photograph of the Brown sisters by Diane Arbus. Okay, and that's what I got. You guys here, you can pass this around. And for those of you who know Diane Arbus, yeah, very clearly knows Diane Arbus. So that looks kind of vaguely familiar. And see, I'm addressing the issue of has she been ripped off? Okay, what is this thing doing? And here's the picture. I pulled out my book. This is my copy of Diane Arbus's monograph from Aperture. Okay, so this is a very famous book. I'll just go back and forth a little bit. So, is it a copy? Or is she being ripped off? I don't know. Here is another Diane Arbus-like photo. The amazing thing is that it can copy these styles. It can't count. Okay, this is why you have all these weird fingers. It loses track. It has, for the same reason you can't solve the jigsaw puzzle. It doesn't have any reasoning ability yet. And I think that's probably what's going to be built in. So there's a lot of grotesque things happen. So the outputs of these programs need refinement, need to be fixed up. And so really all the artists now that are using this, they're inventing little workflows to fix things like hands. So just to take the raw output from these programs and make things look, just make it more usable. Okay, here's a Sally Mann. Okay, for those of you who know Sally Mann. Sally Mann takes a lot of photographs of her children, or I think they're older now, and they look like this. I mean, this clearly, people look at this and, well, that's a Sally Mann photo. The other thing I looked at this and worried about was like, wow, you can see how quickly this thing can slide toward child pornography, which is actually some of the problems that Sally Mann had as well. But here's his, pass this around. This is Sally Mann. And here's the last one from this set. Okay. This is Gary Winogrand. This was for Jeremy. Okay. Jeremy, Gary Winogrand is a street photographer in New York City, and so when you start asking for Gary Winogrand pictures, you kind of get these blurry, figures walking down the street in New York City, kind of black and white photos. But there's another person trying to, it's kind of weird and confused as well. So here's the Gary Winogrand. So what I'm going to talk to you about real quick is how the heck does this thing work? Why is this working? What's going on here? Okay, so I'm going to back up a couple more years, going back to about 2017, 2018. The big advancement back then was in natural language processing, okay? English, making words, sort of like what we're seeing now, ChatGPT. Picture generation lagged behind. And the reason why is because natural words don't take up that much memory on a computer. Pictures take up an enormous amount of memory on the computer. So all the advances happened with language. And for those of you who were following back then, there was a point in about 2017 or 2018 where all of a sudden, when Google Translate got really good, people started noticing, the English to French or English to German or English to Japanese, like kind of overnight, there was this leap in ability. And this was, because they were training larger language models. Okay, so in mid-2020, late 2020, or mid-2020, some guys wrote a paper, I don't know their name, I didn't look it up, but it was a brilliant idea. They said, okay, if you do English to German, why can't we do English to picture? It's like, ooh, and that's like, whoa, okay, that was the thought. And so when we're doing English to German or English to French, what it's doing is predicting word after word after word. There's no like big master plan. It's just like, what's the most probable next word? What's the most probable next word? And it's sort of like when you're doing a text on your iPhone and it's doing autocomplete, it's guessing the next word ahead. That's all these things are doing, okay? So it's going word after word after word after word. So how do we make a picture? So here's how it works. Imagine your picture, your output picture is this big checkerboard, okay? Big tiles, 8 by 8. Bum, 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 bum. So what this thing is going to output, instead of a word, it outputs a token, okay? And what's a token? Well, it has its own special little vocabulary of words and its own little hidden dictionary that it's built. And so this first token that comes out says sky, okay? And then we go to the next token, and this next token says sky. And then we go to the next tile, and the next token says sky with a little bit of cloud, okay? And the next token says sky. And the next token is actually back here in the next row down, okay? And this token says sky with a mountaintop, okay? And this next token says sky with a mountaintop. And this one says sky with a little bit of cloud and a mountaintop. And this says sky and mountaintop. So basically, we've broken this picture into a sentence like that. It's outputting the most logical next token. And if we go to the next row down, you basically have mountain and grassland, mountain and grassland, mountain and lake, mountain and grassland. Down at the bottom, you're going grass, grass, lake, grass. Okay. So now we have these tokens that sort of summarize the picture in a serialized form, and then they bring in another program after that, a second program, and it takes each of these tiles and paints the picture. Oh, that's sky. Yeah, I'll make a little sky picture here. I'll make a little sky picture, little sky with cloud, little sky with mountaintop, blah, blah, blah. And that's how the picture comes out. And actually, those tokens take up a lot less memory than the actual pixels. So it was actually able to work pretty efficiently. Another thing that I did want to say, when Stable Diffusion gave you the program, I said they gave it to you, it lets you have the whole thing. What does it mean that they gave you this whole thing? Okay, they did not give you 6 billion pictures. Okay, what happens with these programs is it takes all the input and boils it all down into a soup. Okay, that's your neural network, and what they gave you was the soup. And the soup is what makes the picture, and that's at a manageable size of like 4 to 5 gigabytes. And I actually have a version on my iPhone that works. So one of the problems with this technology, however, is like once all those 6 billion pictures are cooked down into the soup, you don't know which pictures made the final image, okay? And that's what we're seeing as the problem. So people are feeling ripped off, and there's no way of tracing back that, hey, that's a Gary, that came from a Gary Winningrand picture, or, really worse, did this come from a Diane Arbus picture? We don't know, they don't know, and I think it's gonna take a lot of work to try to reverse engineer these things. So what we got is the soup, okay? And the same thing is happening with GPT, is like you're getting the soup and it's stolen everyone's text off the internet and cooked it all down there. And one of the issues, I was reading a really great GPT conversation the other day or yesterday, and someone was asking, like, how do I stop mass shootings? And the thing went and gave about 7 coherent points, common talking points of what you should do to stop mass shootings, red flag laws, it went through everything that's out there in the culture, but there was no citation of sources, and it's just like, wow, where is this information coming from? So I found that kind of horrifying. Even though the information was coherent, pretty usable, most people at this point was good enough to believe and use, but you don't know where it's coming from. And so I think transparency is a neural net problem, and that is something that sort of has to be solved over the next couple of years. Okay, so one more thing I wanted to talk about. This is I was trying to make a picture of Half Dome a black and white photograph of Half Dome by Ansel Adams. For those of you who've been up Half Dome. Okay, this is a black and white photograph by Ansel Adams, and I recognize the lighting scheme. Sort of, he's taken a couple, photos that have this sort of backlit look to it. So one of the things that these image generators do really well is replicate style. This is really what it does best. It's a really, really good mimic, okay? For whatever the reason, it got lucky. It just happened to be good at this thing. When it digests the picture and breaks it down, it's really good at finding out the features of the image. And this is because of computer graphics that we did back in the day. It finds edges, it finds little shapes, it finds the patterns, it finds the gradations, in a picture. It finds the thicknesses of a line. Is it a thin line? Is it a thick line? Is it a brush stroke? And all these things add up to a style. I suspect that there are analogies going on with text, that it's probably learning, similar styles of text. So again, it can't do any reasoning right now, and I think that's really the big challenge ahead. It can't add 2 + 2, but it can mimic style. And this is one of its powers, and this is what we're seeing. So I got only just 1 or 2 more pictures, and then I'll tell you my predictions of where it's going to go next. But here's a picture. There's a famous Chinese watercolor artist named Dong Kingman. Was he American as well?
I think so.
I don't know, but he was Chinese. I think he's from Hong Kong, and he made a lot of watercolors all around the world. He made watercolors in San Francisco, and so I said a watercolor of San Francisco Chinatown by Dong Kingman, and I got that. And I showed this to a friend of mine, Richard, who knew Dong Kingman very well. And I said, does this look like a Dong Kingman photograph? And he goes, not really, And also Dong Kingman's style changed over the years, So I put in another photo, and I put in my Uncle Benny. Okay, a black and white photograph of San Francisco Chinatown by Benjamin Chinn. Now, Benjamin Chinn is actually a pretty obscure guy, so the internet really doesn't know who he is. And this is the photo I got. Okay, it's not a Benjamin Chinn photograph, not at all. It doesn't know who it is. What I think it did do is say San Francisco Chinatown black and white photograph, and it's just like, and it has this kind of stereotypical view of a Chinatown. And if you look at, it's the same composition, okay? And it's just, so I'm trying to show you the limitations of this thing. It's just flopped, the composition. Okay, so the final part here is I'm going to talk about, there's a couple things here. So the lawsuits have started. Last week, Getty Images sued them for using their stock photography in their training. There were also 3 artists came together in a class action suit. I think one of the artists, I think her name was Carla Ortiz or something. She's like a video. She illustrates and does production design for Industrial Light and Magic, video games, and things like that. And she's been really kind of pissed off because a couple of these artists, what happens is that people started using their names in the prompts, and they're saying, okay, this is I want this photo, this drawing like a Carla Ortiz drawing. And actually, the guy who got screwed the most with this was this guy named Greg Rutkowski. And Rutkowski, I guess you're familiar with this, yeah.
It's like Magic the Gathering style.
Yeah, exactly. He's Polish, so he became the computer, the guys, the people, the users are young. They like fantasy art, and so they started using his name a lot. So if you go out, so what happened is that there are now like 100,000 images that were generated that have the name Greg Rutkowski on it. So if you go looking for him on the internet, you're going to find Greg Rutkowski photos, and you're going to find 100,000 counterfeits. And to make things worse, of course, over time they're going to train on that too. So basically, you've poisoned the well. So this guy's, he does get screwed. There is a website you can go to called Have I Been Trained, and you can put your name in, and it's supposed to show you. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I put my name in. It's just like it searches, and I got a bunch of Asian-looking men, and it didn't seem useful yet. Okay. So now the other camp of artists are people who just love this thing. Okay, this is amazing, and they've really been empowered by it, because this is like, you've handed them this power to them. And a good example of how it's used is like I was talking to on a panel with a video game art director. Okay, he makes all the art, and he goes, imagine that if his job that day is to design a new logo for Starbucks. Okay, what this guy does is he'll go to Midjourney and say a logo with a mermaid and a coffee cup, and give me 100 examples. And he walks away for an hour, and he comes back because it only takes about 30 seconds a picture, and he'll come back in an hour and there's 100 of these things, and a lot of them will be crappy. Okay, they're kind of weird, distorted, and everything. But there's going to be 3 or 4 there that are really good. And it's like, God, I would have never have thought of that composition. And it's not going to be finished, but that's his starting point now. And he'll go through and refine from there. So what I'm saying is that this thing is really good at, you can say, idea generation, because really we get trapped in our own minds. If you said, give me 100 Starbucks logos, you're going to do 5 and then start repeating. Here you got 100. And so usually a person, on their own will start from here, they'll find one they like, and I can refine it to here. I can get it this much better. What this gives the guy is a much better starting point. Okay, he can start from here and refine to there. So that's one of the values of these things. A friend of mine was trying to write a science fiction story with a friend the other day, with time travel involved. And they went to ChatGPT and says, "Give me some story, plots with time travel." And boom, they got, oh, hey, so a couple of them were really pretty good. Never would have thought of that. So you can see this. He said, I can see this being in a writer's room, for a TV series. You got a bunch of writers, and you got ChatGPT, like also spitting out ideas. So again, incredibly useful tools. Okay, so here are some predictions.
Take this down, everybody.
Okay, the scary part for me is that while we've handed ourselves this new suite of really powerful tools, bad guys have also just gotten this new suite of really powerful tools. And there are some very clever people with evil minds out there, and I don't know what they're going to do, but they can do, a lot of bad can be done with this, particularly with this text generation. So I don't even want to think about what they can do with all these new powers. Okay, and on the, I wouldn't even call this, on the slightly more positive side, you remember I said OpenAI is owned by Microsoft? Well, what does Microsoft make? Microsoft makes Word, okay? So, and everyone uses Word, which pretty much means that they're going to be putting ChatGPT in Microsoft Word. I'm sure they're working on it already. So that, hey, it's just like you fire a Word to make a document and just like, can you just start me up here, and I have to write a book report, and I'll clean it up, but it's an obvious place to put it. What else does Microsoft make? They make PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm making a talk and I'm going to need a slide. Oh, I need a photo of a guy in a hard hat working in a factory, working on a drill press. Okay, and just like, you're just going to type it in, and it's going to give you 5 choices. And you're just going to pick one. It's too obvious. Other things that Microsoft makes, they make this search engine called Bing, the one that no one uses. Well, ChatGPT is being used for, it's very obvious, has search implicate. It can do things, it can search. So, last month, Google went on red alert. They went on their own red alert because this is the first time it's like, ooh, the Google search engine is really going to be threatened by the Bing search engine, and Microsoft, like on Monday, put $10 billion into that little company on Folsom Street. So, yeah, things are changing. Here's another thought I had. I don't know if YouTube has had this idea. I'm sure they've had, but have you ever tried to upload a video to YouTube and you've got music on it, and it flags you because you stole the music for someone, or someone's got the right to it? You go, oh crap, what do I do now? Well, the thing for them to do is put a music generation button in there, because it's just like, it just makes sense. It's just like, oh, that's solved my problem. All of this stuff is really rough right now, but give it a year or two. They're probably working on it now. And the other thing about the music is that I've already seen demos with ones where actually they're taking waveforms, the pictures of the waveforms, and putting it in, and the waveform makes the music. So that's why Stable Diffusion can actually make music by producing waveform pictures, and you can type in more banjo, and you get a new picture, and it comes out and it plays with more banjo, and then you can put in more cowbell, get more cowbell. So, and the last idea that's coming, which I'm sure Meta, Facebook is working on with their VR headsets, and I think they're going to do virtual world building in there. And this is again pretty obvious. It's actually kind of cool. So you're going to be able to go in there and say, I'm in a castle, and boom, you're in a castle, you know, and there's a moat over there, and boom, and there's a dungeon over there, boom, boom, boom. And that's actually, you know, so it's going to kind of be like the holodeck, and that'll probably take, you know, a couple more years, but, you know, because they can already make 3D models using this stable diffusion method. Okay, so other, you know, and I made a list of things, actual vocations that are going to be affected by this, or, you know, helped, you know, like concept design, character design, graphic illustration, stock photography. Yeah, I think, you know, Getty stock photography is actually, could be really threatened by this thing because, you know, this thing can just make a picture. You know, right now they're kind of okay, but you saw those, you know, it's getting close, and for some people it's good enough. Logo design, visual effects in movies. Visual effects is really, really labor intensive and expensive. And there's going to be lots of ways to save money with visual effects with this stuff. You know, because it's actually kind of making avatars like a brute force activity. And so, you know, you can save a lot of money just figuring out where to put it in. Animation, voice generation. Okay, so this stuff is talking, and you know, maybe like audiobooks, you know, that, you know, if it gets good enough, probably won't be good enough now, but, you know, maybe in a couple of years you can have the automatic, you know, audiobook reading. Like I said before, story generation. This is, you know, it's like really good with, you know, I don't know if I would call it creativity, but that's another discussion you guys can talk about. But, you know, idea generation, code generation's happening. And the last one is like storytelling. So, and the last point is that there's an ecosystem of startups. You know, jobs, people, you know, this is the new thing. And if I was 25 years old today, I'm actually not sure what I would be doing. So, with that, I think, yeah, I mean, I've said my piece. So, if anyone, you know, I mean, it's question, any thoughts? You know, I can actually just really throw it open to everyone here because, like I said, it's affecting all of your lives. We're reading about it daily, so I was just wondering any other thoughts that people had, or you know, did I miss anything? Because like I don't work for the big companies. So.
One thing that struck me when you were talking was this idea generation.
Yeah.
It's not the same as intelligence at all, but it's pulling a whole bunch of themes together that you ask it to put together and make me 100 Starbucks logos.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. It's not intelligence, but it gets the designer outside of his box.
Yes.
Or it could.
Yeah.
You know, so there might be one or two ideas out of that 100 that, I didn't think of that. That's so cool. And it's not because this thing is intelligent, it's because if you put enough random ideas together, you come up with things you wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, the typing monkeys. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so, you know, but yeah. Yeah, hi.
So you said a lot of times that in a few years these things will be ready. For almost every single instance that you've said of that,
Yeah.
I've seen a production ready
Yeah.
better than a professional output for like audiobooks. 4 or 5 companies
Oh,
that
already?
do better,
Yeah.
better than the voice actor. For video, I just saw one the other day that translates Japanese. They took swear words out and made an R movie PG-13. Already production in like actual films that are at Cannes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So every single one that you said, I don't think it's a few years.
Yeah. Well, I think if we're like, to get the thing into the VR headset, might be a little bit of engineering. Yeah. But yeah, you know, I absolutely, and the other thing is like, millions of people started using this. That's millions of developers who are motivated. You know, like I said, they're going to try that. We're going to try that everywhere. And if I've had the idea, there's probably about 10,000 guys who have had the same idea, or people who have had the same idea. But yes. Any other things, Abhi, that you
One
see?
really big one is you can talk about the image to image.
Oh, yeah.
Which is where instead of training on text, they train on an image. And then there's a tool called the clip interrogator that I think you would find fascinating. And you can drag a picture of yourself and it'll tell you the text that it thinks you are.
Oh, in reverse.
Yeah, it's sort of a text to image using the prompt model. And so that's out now, and so you can take I actually took a picture of Starry Night by Van Gogh, interrogated it, and then regenerated it from the interrogation, but Starry Night again. So you can take a picture of the painting, you can drag it into a box, and it will make a starry night with lots of swirls and a moon done in a post-impressionistic style, Van Gogh, 6 other artists, and that's standard prompt. Then you can take that prompt and refeed it back into Stable Diffusion, and it will give you Starry Night.
What does it degenerate? If you do this over and over and over again, the telephone game, what happens?
It's weird.
Okay, yeah.
But the reverse, it's much more seamless than Mesenteric of converting photo painting into text and then back again.
Well, I tried doing the photo booth kiss in image to image. Okay, I put in the photo and see if I could make them kiss. And what I got out of it was the 2 people looked like 2 different people. It was like 2 new people. That it was drawing too much information from the 6 billion images. So I'm sure it's possible. That image wasn't doing the exactly what I wanted to do, but yes. Yeah.
So, Adam, you and I read the same blog, and there's a big elephant in the room about truth and accuracy and reasoning. This is a bright, shiny object. Everyone's migrating to it because it can do one thing really well, and it can create bullshit for no cost in giant reams. And that's great, but there's no economic incentive here really to go for truth. So you can have ChatGPT create, massive reams of really good sounding, almost, might even be accurate stuff, but there's no reasoning behind it. And maybe you could do some hack fix to pictures so you don't have 4 fingers, you have 5 fingers, but it's still not going to have truth. It's like if general intelligence is like this, we're over here in a corner with this bright, shiny object that's working really well, but it's only one little part of general intelligence. And people are treating it like it's the real thing, and they're treating it like it's a real thing because there's money to be made by saying it's a real thing. Yeah. So you sort of have an optimistic thing where you said it's going to get better, but I think it's hiding a real flaw.
Well, I think they're working on it. I think that is, putting reasoning into it is sort of like the next. It's going to be a lot of work. I mean, I think there's Band-Aid hacks that are being done, to clean up text and things like that. One of the things that was different about ChatGPT, over the GPT-3, was they put in some human feedback in there. Okay, and it's called reinforcement learning. But basically, they had humans read some of the output, rate the text, feed it back in, and that apparently improved the performance of ChatGPT, and that's what came out in November. I'm not an expert on this. I'm just repeating what I read.
The problem with ChatGPT-4 is that the model that you just described is not scalable, right, from billions to trillions. So that's where they really have to look at the algorithms to put reasoning into it, and not just pure amplification of intelligence, because that's not going to get us where we need to be.
Yeah, getting more is not going to take you there.
Yeah.
Even though getting more did
It'll
make
be better, but it's not going to take you to where it's real.
Yeah.
What if you look at reverse, where people are trying to narrow? Well, it's already narrow because it's made by white people who are, things that in the past.
Yeah.
But what if you get a group of people who want a narrow viewpoint, narrow set of figures, narrow set of words? Can they adjust the database to bias it to that?
Sure.
And that's where I see it going, is that you get a group who's trying to get action, but so instead of expanding, they're narrowing to get a set of
Yes.
pictures that are,
Yeah, and this is the malicious actors
right.
scenario. Did you have a question?
Yes, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the value of these as in the artistic field, right? I think you spoke a lot about the derivative nature of it
Yeah.
and some of the limitations of it. But can this be used as something to actually generate actual art and not?
It's a really good question, and it's also, how is this going to affect like fine art photography? Is it going to change the way Gary Winogrand goes out and takes pictures in the street, or the way you and I go out and take pictures in the street? And in general, for me, probably not. I get a lot of satisfaction out of walking out into the street and making a picture. I think one of the places where AI may affect what we're doing in photography is like in your iPhone, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there's some AI going on in those photos to make them prettier, to make the iPhone now is not exactly taking the picture, giving you the picture of what it's seeing. It's giving you the picture of what it thinks, what you want to see, and that's kind of weird, and because it's, and those are aesthetic values that are being applied in camera. In terms of artists, artists are already flooding the internet with AI generated art, including myself. But so it's up to the curators, to the people who know what they're looking at, and this is hard on them too. Everyone's really, I was speaking with a photography curator the other day, and in some ways I was helping her, educating her, and she's trying to find what has true artistic value and what is very derivative, and I'm seeing 100,000 other people doing it. So, for myself, I'm actually probably not going to do that much with like an image generator or stable diffusion, unless I come up with some really brilliant idea which no one else has, which is very unlikely, But I am going to continue on the path that I was taking before, where I take the photos, where I make the database, and I can, better the image, or it's sort of I get, like I said, I get a better feeling about it, and like I said, these images are creepy, and creepy is going to take a little bit of work to get out, to get past this. We're in a real uncanny valley stage right now. You get a lot of anime faces, doll face, because like they had a button in there called Face Fix, and I started using it, and the faces looked worse because they came out looking like China dolls, and to the young developers, this was a better face. They had pulled together this model of what their image of a better face was, and it's just like, well, that's not a better face to me. If you try to make a picture of an old person on stable diffusion, an old wrinkled person, it gets pretty horrific. Questions, thoughts? Yeah.
You mentioned, among artists, there's, I'm hearing a lot of excitement, but also tremendous anxiety about these tools.
Yeah.
And you touched on a little bit of both, but I'm wondering kind of you personally, where you fall on that spectrum right now.
Well, my life is kind of affected because I was making AI art for a couple of years here. There were only a handful of people doing it because it was kind of difficult, right? And so, my little world has just been a little upended because now there's 5 million people making AI art. So I have, a lot more competition. Luckily, I'm old enough to say, it's okay. But if so I have been affected, and obviously, I went to the AI out of fear, because I thought, you have this fear of being left behind. I said, oh, I better download this Stable Diffusion because all the young kids are doing it. I gotta, I gotta, see, stay current. So all of these things that are moving quickly are scaring people. And now, I imagine writers are scared, or freelance writers are scared because, like, ooh, there's a certain market which has probably been eliminated where this output is good enough. Do you have? Before the talk, we were talking about sources. Because like I had this great article I was reading, but there was no attribution to anything in the article. I mean, is that a problem journalistically, or?
It's worrisome because sources give you context, they give you a sense of what to rely on and what not to rely on. So right now we're in those early days. I think we're starting to see some basic articles written by AI, and there is a lot of question about where the sourcing is coming from, and a lot of anxiety about it.
Yeah, my thought when I was reading, it's sort of like you've got this scholarly book text, and there's no index, there's no footnotes, there's no appendix in there. And the reason that you have those things are links, okay? You're trying to place your body of knowledge within the network of knowledge out in the universe. And this, the more links to it, and this is in the early days of the internet, they said, hey, you got to link up your pages, because if there are more people referring to your book, then your book becomes more relevant, and that book that information has more value. So a book with no index or no references, it's a little scary. Is this a minority opinion or something that a lot of people believe in? And that was my horrific thought. But people who are a lot of people using ChatGPT are really excited. It's just like, wow, this is really great. And when I actually started reading it, the text is much better than I thought it was going to be. It's more than enough for many purposes. Any other thoughts, George?
Yeah, what it's really caused for me, one way, I didn't want to be left behind, so I was kind of poo-pooing all the digital text-to-image stuff, but I started playing around with it and found it was pretty strong. It could produce some images that I really liked, and I started to really kind of use those more as reference, and then it caused me to go back to, not all the way back to, canvas with oils and acrylics, but back to digital art and producing my own digital art, and I put a few things up. What I found interesting is I put up both sides, just I wanted to see the response, and I put up some of the things I actually drew digitally myself. And got some good response from that, but then I put up some images that I also generated from text to AI, text to image. And I was very clear about that, and people kind of responded to it as if I did it. And it's like, no, I just did text. So I kind of decided, in my own use, to use it more for reference, just to kind of get, and you talked about that, and I think that's a really good use of it. But again, it really kind of, I know what the names of artists I put in there for reference, but I don't see that any different than going to Getty Images or looking at the actual artwork of artists to use as reference. So I think if it's used that way, I feel good about it, but I can't, generate the images and put my name on it and say that's my art.
Yeah.
So that's the difference for me. That's kind of
and the same thing.
testimony to this.
Yeah,
You made reference to that.
Yeah, I'm not going to put my name on that.
Using the technology.
Many people here they're photographers, or at least they are very interested in photography. So tonight we learned many things about the AI photo. They evolved a lot from early days. And can you predict when it will replace human job to do the touch up, do the post editing? So it can free us from all night long post editing. I mean, yeah, how long the AI photo can do the post editing like human do? Can you see that?
Well, actually, I just thought of what you said, you know, maybe image to image. You know, it's just like you go out and take a bunch of photos and it doesn't quite work the way you wanted. And then, you know, obviously Photoshop already put some of these things even before this, you know, it's like make the guy smile type of thing. But, you know, can you make the photo that I wanted to make that I didn't take out there in the field?
I have a question to your comment, actually. So you mentioned you would never put your name on it for something that you generated with one of these. You've also mentioned sitting an hour, letting it take 1,000 revisions, and then picking one from 1,000. How many revisions does it have to do before you do put your name on it? Do you have a number? It does 1 million and you pick from 1 million? Is that enough choice for you where you put yourself into it?
I don't know. You know, I saw a workflow from like Invoke AI. You know, they've got a nice little interface there, and then, you know, and I downloaded it. You know, but you know, basically the guy went through and refined each character. You know, just like, oh, you know, okay, this make the table better, make that person better, fix the foot, blah 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 blah. You know, so pretty soon they had worked every corner of the image, and they clearly had an image in their mind that they were trying to make when they started. I'm going to dodge that answer and say I don't know at what point I say that's mine.
Yeah, I have a quick response, sorry. What I found is, I don't know the true answer to this, but the more descriptive that you get, the more refined the image can become, and the more maybe you can claim it as your own. I don't know, that's kind of where my sort of exploration is at the moment. Because it's like man eating sushi. It's like, but the more descriptive you get, then does that mean you take more ownership on it? I don't know, and that's kind of where I'm experimenting with.
So to be clear, and Adam mentioned Invoke AI, and if you watch a demo of Invoke AI or you use it, it is a much more interactive process. It's not just prompting. In fact, you know, when I'm working with this stuff, prompting is just the beginning. And I might end up in Photoshop. But in Invoke AI, you can really guide the image making in many ways, even to your gestures with paint become color and become features, geometrical features and stuff. So there is more ownership, and I think if you stand way, 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 way back, it's a paintbrush. It's just a really crazy paintbrush.
You know, if you're a graphic designer and a client of yours says, I want a new logo for this or that, and you use one of these toolkits to produce 1 million examples, and you keep sort of tweaking it and twisting it, and something comes up that is really right on the money in your artistic opinion, and you might make a few more changes, but would you put your name on that? Would you bring it to the client or not? I mean, it's all in your own toolkit, no different from, it's like Photoshop on steroids maybe, but it's a toolkit for generating variations on whatever input you gave.
Back in the day when we were working, I was working on they introduced the new NBC logo. And this is the one that you see now. And it was made by this famous designer named Ivan Shemaev. And you know, I just flashed it. When Ivan put his name on the thing, you know, walking into the NBC, you know, says, I made this, here's your new NBC logo, which is going to run for 40 years. Yeah, you know, I don't have an answer for that.
But then every single derivative that every other network came up with, you know, based on the basic ideas of that.
Yeah, because that guy got paid a lot of money, you know, for for that logo, you know. So.
Well, they've been using it for 40 years.
And I look at the Wimbledon up and I'm like, oh, they're still using that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I don't follow this, but so what has happened with pornography?
Oh.
Like, has it really blossomed with AI?
They've
Like,
got
what's
16%.
happening?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
is it an issue? I mean, that was like, is it an issue?
They can grab anyone's face and put it in any, position or relationship. Or
But
whatever
can't you do
want
that
to
anyway now? You could just take somebody's face and, I guess
You-
you do it faster.
Better, faster, cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go to a site that aggregates AI photos like ArtHub or something, you'll see what gets upvoted is manga-inspired semi-pornography drawing kind of thing of women. It's just all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, where do you see things going with regulation or lack thereof?
I think it's going to be really tough. If you look at the age and the knowledge base of our congressmen, I think Ted Lieu had an article the other day. Apparently, he's a representative in Congress. Apparently he has a computer science degree, and so he's been doing this stuff. Yeah, and there were 3 representatives who have computer science degrees, which means that's less than 1%. And this thing is moving way too fast right now. And at this point, it's gonna, it's not gonna keep up. Actually, Diane?
Yes.
This is Diane Chung. She's a gallery owner. And what was the UK? I don't remember that article I sent you months ago. What did the UK? What was their stand on legislation?
The current legislation was back in August, so I haven't really followed up what they're doing. But their conclusion is the current legislation is sufficient to address where the technology at this point, it will be evaluated should the need come up.
Should the need come up? Yeah. Okay.
Since there's a lot of fair use that people could claim
Okay.
with all this machine learning and AI sprawling out there
Yeah.
to upload it in public domain. So, and especially in the US, fair use is big. People grab stuff off Instagram. But hey, Richard Prince got sued, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
There is always like AI for good and ethics AI, like every organization at the same speed that this is going, there are people working together to make sure that we do not create like bigger issues with it. So I don't think it's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the models that we built with all these images that are cooked down with the soup, the problem is the attribution wasn't cooked down, so they kind of have to go back to the drawing board and figure all that out. And so it creates a lot more data too. So, and the other model is, can you opt out? How do you control that?
Yeah, I mean, Stable Diffusion offered an opt-out model. The first version of Stable Diffusion had a list of artists that came with it. And it was like, so these are the ones that we know we've stolen. And they create great styles, so try using their names. And in the latest version of the Stable Diffusion, they got rid of it.
So the Getty lawsuit's really interesting because what Getty said in their press release, they're not really looking for punishment and for damages. They're looking for something like Spotify, where they can earn money from everything, rip off the artist, and so we're in the Napster stage and we're going to the Spotify stage.
It's like if you just put it that way, it's like right now, like if you're going to a theater, I don't know, like to the MoMA, right? You see paintings, like photos, you get inspired, you go outside, you try to replicate the photos. It's the same thing that those things are doing at the end, right? It's just at a bigger scale. It has more power. It has more knowledge, more information on it. So we do that daily. I mean, those machines, what they have is a learning model that we already know, we already use. It's just that it just aggregates way more content and
Snapchat is a huge, like, considered done in the web, like, it's such a huge Snapchat.
Yeah, to the attribution thing, I don't see how that can possibly ever work, because, I mean, the thing that the chat thing produces, the attribution would be, well, it's 0.01% of this guy, and a 100% of this guy, you know, it's not from any one thing.
That's the problem.
And it just seems,
For 30 seconds or so many bars from a piece of music, and it's allowed.
Yeah.
So there is, like you said, grab a little bit here and grab a little bit there, and they're somewhat protected. But you have brought up regulation. You were the one that sent me the article about that White House task force
Yeah.
that was formed around the summer when all this AI came out. It was a hot topic. But what has come out of it?
I don't have faith in.
Yeah, nothing, because you have documented, so. Regulators, they can't regulate what they don't understand. And they will always look for existing regulation and interpret in a way that would address what's out there. It's a sort of a very cynical view, but I think more would happen if someone really famous, really rich got ripped off enough by all these AI programs, then yeah, something would happen. Like I said, going back to Richard Prince and Gagosian, one artist decides, no, you've ripped off enough from the rest of the art world or other artists. I'm gonna take you to court. So, you know, there's that.
I think that the GDPR isn't like that, the regulation in Europe, right? The GDPR, something like that, so that's like, that's preventing companies in tech to actually aggregate photos of people, like the Ring, for example, or the Mask doorbell, they cannot capture images.
Okay.
I do think that do see it coming.
Okay.
They are avoiding
Yeah.
just aggregating that type.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I believe that. Okay. If there's no other comments, I think, you know, we can go out.
All right, guys, please give Adam another round of applause. There are many artists here today. We've done an artist talk here. If you want to host an event here, feel free to scan the QR code right behind Adam. And everyone have a good night. Get home safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.